Hi, this is Jim Gibson with Cable.com. Thank you for joining me today. Very much appreciate it. If you remember, please subscribe and give me a thumbs up. I'd very much appreciate it. Today we're going to be talking about color codes and we're going to talk about pinouts on an RJ45. And you got to get the pins right. And if you're not right, you're going to have some problems with them. Now, to start out with, I got a phone call, about 2 weeks ago that caused me to think that I needed to do a video on this. A guy was talking to me about pinouts and he was asking questions about them and things like that. And I was answering his questions and he said, oh, you know, I don't follow the color code. I got my own color code. And he said, what do you think of that? And I said, I think it's a bad idea. And he said, why? I said, because the cable and the RJ45 jacks, and RJ stands for registered jack 45, is actually designed for a certain purpose, and you can get crosstalk if you don't pin it out right, and if you don't, follow the integrity of the standard of the color code. So today we're going to talk about the color code, things like that. We're going to talk about how it applies to the telephone industry. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is what in the world is an RJ45? Well, this is an RJ45, okay? Has 8 pins in there. If I can get it to focus, there's those 8 pins. And when you put them on the wall, by the way, you put them on the wall so that the pins are up. And the reason why you want those pins up is because the dust and the dirt comes down, it's not going to affect the pins. Now, the RJ45 plugs plug right into it right there, just like that. Now this one's not going to plug in because it's not crimped down. I don't think the other one is, but this one will. Let's see. Let's give it a try because this is already crimped down. There you go. That's crimped down. That's what it looks like. That should be in the wall just like this. You can also see there's writing on it. So this is a what? Category 5. I can't see. I'm hanging over the camera and I can't see what it's. There it is. Cat 5e. So they come in different standards, Cat 5e, Cat 6. Now, but let's get back to the cable itself. So you notice there's a cable here. This is Cat 6 cable. And if you notice, it has blue, orange, green, and brown. And that brown may not come out too cool on the camera. It looks like black, actually, to me. But it's blue, orange, green, and brown. And they're all twisted. And if you notice, and this is some of the things you should know if you're a cabler, the twists here are different. Each twist is, some are tighter, some aren't as tight, things like that. And that's to disrupt the crosstalk between the pairs. And of course in Cat 6 and some other categories, you're going to find one of these little twisters here that separate the cable, the separators. And they keep the cables separated, but they also twist. Now, there's real neat reasons why there's multiple twists and why the twist is in a certain way and why there's a separator and everything else. And the reason for that is because you're passing over this electronics that pulsate, kind of pulsate, whatever. And it's sort of along the lines of antenna design and radio wave propagation and things like that. Where if you twist the cable, the more likely the signal will stay on the cable. But if you have cables running parallel to each other and they're completely straight, it will go from one conductor to the other conductor. So twists are important. And but today we're going to talk about pinouts, and we're going to talk about the color code. We're going to talk about where it came from. We're going to talk about different things like that. So a little history of the color code and why it's important. Okay, so you would think that the IEEE people would be the ones that set up the color code, but it is not. It is the Telecommunications Industry Association, affectionately known as the TIA, and also the Electronics Industry Alliance, EIA. Those two organizations got together to define the standards for unshielded twisted pair. It's also for shielded twisted pair, by the way, but they always say UTP, unshielded twisted pair, color coding for wires and standard pinouts on the cables. Now, you can go to their website. It's www.tiaonline.org or www.eia.org, and you can get some more detail if that's what you're interested in. This is about the extent of my information, what we're going to talk about today, And it's about the most practical you could possibly be, but having a little bit of background so you know why things are done certain ways. Now, anytime you deal with twisted pair cable, you're going to, it's always addressed as a pair, not individual wires. But when it comes to pinout, they're going to talk about the individual wires, obviously, because you need to know what wire goes where on a cable. So for those of you that are stressing out over this, you can relax because it's right there on the side of the cables. Good cables. I sell these cables. This is what jacks. RJ45 jacks. That's an RJ45 jack. And it shows the pinouts right there. You know, what color goes where. There's a solid orange. There's a white orange. It goes right in between these two. And right there it lines up into the slots. Now this is an RJ45. Where did the RJ45 come from? Well, RJ comes from the word registered jack from the phone company. Yes. And in this particular case, RJ45s that are used now for computer network cabling and, you know, CT, closed circuit TV and other type of devices, always had the same standard. They always use RJ45. Now, the old telephone systems, well, they were RJ11, and they used the center two pins, which is called pair 1, and they're going to be the blue-white cables, and they're going to and they are polarity sensitive, the old telephones, so you're going to have to pay close attention to how you put these cables in if you're cabling an RJ11 jack. Now, the interesting thing is you can take the mod plug of an RJ11 and it will plug right into an RJ45 jack. So here's a mod plug. This is what they call a modular plug. It's shortened to mod plug. This is an RJ45 that has 8 pins there. RJ11 has 2 pins and sometimes 4 pins. They don't. If it's a true RJ11, it's only going to have 2 pins. Now, what is RJ11 used for? Old telephone systems. It's going to be your fax machines. It's going to be your answering machines. It's old telephone stuff. And you may still see it in the world. And it's called an RJ11. But the neat thing is, like I already said, that you can plug these right in, or RJ11. I don't have an RJ11 mod plug here because I don't really sell them anymore. No one wants them. But you can take a male RJ11 and plug it right into an RJ45 and it will work. It's really kind of interesting. Now, we're going to be talking about that, but you also have something else going on. You have 2 standards. And the 2 standards are your T568A and your T568B. Now, I always use the B standard, the 568B standard of pinouts, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. But the A pinout is not that hard to follow. It's there. It's acceptable. It's professional. It's used by people. The only thing you got to remember is that if you're going to cable the jack as an RJ45 jack, you're going to cable it as a T568B, okay? If you're going to cable it that way, then the back of the patch panel, when you punch down your cables in the patch panel, then they're going to have to be a B standard. Now, this is a little bit getting ahead of ourselves, but I'm going to show you the difference between the A's and the B's. Now, here is a professionally made patch cord, and these things are great. They're very inexpensive, by the way. But some people want to know pinouts. They want to make their own. So if you look at it, you notice that orange cable right there on the left side of each one, right in there, is orange. Now, if you had an A on one side and a B on the other, that cable would be green. You would have a green cable there. Now, if you see a cable that has orange here, and on the other side of the patch cord, it has green, then you know you have something called a crossover cable. And crossover cables were used often 10, 15 years ago. Not as much today, but crossover cables are used between like instruments. So a computer to a computer. So if you're plugging in the back of a computer from one place and you're just not even using a switch and you're going to plug it into the back of a computer, across the table or something like that, then you're going to need what's called a crossover cable. And that's the purpose is that you have transmit pairs and you have receive pairs. Well, you got to flip them, okay? Because one computer is listening to the transmit side from the other computer and vice versa. So it's always used in devices. Two switches, no, not switches, let's see, two routers, things like that. It's hardly ever used anymore. But as a technician, what I used to do is I'd have a crossover adapter. So when I was working on networks and all, this little adapter takes me from 568B to a 568A. And again, I always used the B standard when I was cabling. And the reason why you want to use the standard is because someone will come behind you, and maybe it will be you or another technician from your company. And they got to figure out how you cable things. And if you're not following the standard, you're going to have a couple problems. You're going to have a lot of crossover issues. You're going to have a lot of degraded transmissions between equipment. And you're going to make it a nightmare to troubleshoot. So always use the standard. It's not that hard. So now that we talked about the 568A and the 568B, let's take a look at the jacks themselves. Let's use a white one here. It's easier to read. If you notice, it has an A and a B. Now again, I always use the B cable, the B side. So it says pin 1 and 2 is the orange pin on the B standard. So that's the same as what you got here. You got the orange ones, right, going in here, are going to be your B standard, orange first. So if you got orange on the left side, that's your B standard. Come on, focus. There you go. Orange on the left side, that's your B standard. Okay, if it's green on the left side, that's your A standard. But it's right here on the jack. So you don't have to remember every single code, and they're not going to talk about pins. They're just going to tell you where the colors are for a normal 568A or B. Just go on our website and we have a diagram where you can see what the rest of the colors should be. Now, why do you have an A and a B? Well, it's primarily used for crossover cable. But you can also cable either A or B as your standard when you cable buildings. So when you're pulling the wire down the wall and you're going to terminate it on a jack, you terminate it either a 568A or a 568B. By custom, most people use 568B, but it doesn't matter. A or B will work. As long as both ends, the jack in the wall and the patch panel in your data room, are both with the same standard, either A or B. And that's called straight through. Here is a straight through cable, and the reason why you want straight through is you usually plug in a computer at the wall, and then you plug in a switch or a hub, hopefully a switch rather than a hub, back in the data room. And the reason why you want it straight through is because PCs communicate using pins 1 and 2 to send information, and they receive information on pins 3 and 6. A hub or a switch in the back sends information on pins 3 and 6, and they receive information on pins 1 and 2. So you want to make sure it's straight through to a switch, because then a switch can communicate with your PC. Why would we need a crossover cable? Well, a crossover cable is used when you're connecting like devices together. PC to PC, you would need a crossover cable. And the reason why? Well, PCs send on pins 1 and 2 and receive on 3 and 6. So if you had a cable that went directly from one PC to another, both would be sending on pins 1 and 2 and would be listening to receive on pins 3 and 6. So if one end of your patch cord is an A and the other end is a B, it's a crossover cable. And what happens then is, or the one PC that's transmitting on pins 1 and 2, on one end is going to be the same pair of cable that's connected to the mod plugs in position 3 and 6. and so they both can communicate to each other, thus the word crossover. The other like devices where you need crossover cables is when you connect two switches or hubs together. That's when you're going to need a crossover cable, just between two switches. So like equipment needs crossover cables, unlike equipment such as PC to switch or switch to routers need straight through pinouts. Now, some of you who are Cisco technicians will wonder, well, I didn't use a crossover cable from my switch A to switch B, and it worked fine. And the reason why is some Cisco equipment has a logic that's built into it that when it recognizes a straight through and it needs a crossover, it adjusts for that particular item or that particular style. The other thing that you sometimes will hear is a rollover cable. And a rollover cable is not a crossover cable. And what happens in a rollover cable is you take the same pinout as you have here and you just roll it completely over this way and then stick it into a mod plug. And in effect it would look like this with this little tab on this side. And the only use that I'm aware of is for what's called a console cable used to program the Cisco equipment. On 10 base T and 100 base TX, there's two pairs that are used. So it's your pins 1 and 2 and 3 and 6. However, on gigabit Ethernet, all the pairs are used to send and receive. So you have two pairs sending and two pairs receiving. Okay, so just take a look at these at the end of this cable here. And again, this is called a network cable, sometimes known as an IW. And what we're going to do is we're going to start at the other end and we're going to strip it down and we're going to open up each of these twisted pairs. And we're going to talk about a little bit about this type of cable. So here is the end of the IW inside wire, and we're going to talk about the pins. Now, no matter, unless you have a manufacturing site or something like that, and you actually have equipment that can handle stranded cable, this is what you use. You use solid wire when you're cabling jacks and when you're making your own patch cords. So that all deals with the color code. So we're going to go through the color code now, but first we're going to strip this cable and I'm going to point out the color code to you. So I use this little stripper. Now to me this is like the best stripper out there. Okay, so I always start like here. You run this around twice or whatever. Sometimes it does a little bit of walking on you, so it becomes a pain in the neck to make sure you cut down. You can see the little walking there. Okay, now just a habit, a little off what we're talking about. If you look at these things, and this is where I cut it, there's a possibility that I nicked it using this device. In fact, there's probably using other devices such as wire cutters and all, you definitely nicked it. So what I do is I get this little cord here, and I've heard people say, well, this is for strengthening of the cable. I don't believe so. I believe it's for opening up the cable. So I take my little cutter and I make a notch in there. It makes it easier to start this, and then I pull it down. Give yourself some distance here also when you're cutting cable or when you're opening it up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to where I trimmed it and I'm going to cut off that part. So even if I nick the cable, it isn't going to affect it. Now this is perfect if I'm ready to cable a jack. Okay, well I got to cut this off too, this little extra sheathing here. So if I'm going to cable a jack, this is perfect. This is how you start it and everything else. And of course you lay it down here in the middle, and I'll do another video on how to punch down a jack using the color pinout code on the side of a jack, A and B. Remember we discussed that. But in this case, let's open it up. Let's get it in order. Just get things cleaned up and ready to go. you notice right away that each of those cables have a twist in it. And if you look really close, and I hope you can, you're going to see that the twist, like the brown one right here, has a tighter twist than the blue. And that's very specific. It's engineered a very specific way to limit crosstalk and some other interference that you might have on these type of cables. So also in the center, you have this divider, and if you notice that divider twists also. So the cable sits within the divider, and it has a twist to it. And so everything is being twisted, and there's a reason for that. There's some physics involved in what's called radio wave propagation and antenna design. And as long as you twist it, or the tighter the twist at different frequencies, the better it is to hold electrical signals onto the cable. So there's a reason for this twist. And the higher you go, this is a Cat 6, Category 6 cable, so it's going to have really tight twists in here because of the frequency of the transmitting signal. So it stops crosstalk and some other issues that you may have. So you want to cut that off. Now the color code, the way it goes with numbers when it comes to, what pair does what and all, that's what we're going to talk about right now. Then we're going to talk about pinout colors, okay? So remember, when you're dealing with cable, if I can get this to cut, when we're dealing with cables, what we're dealing with is we're dealing with pairs, but we got to open up those pairs. So I'm taking the original sheathing here. And the sheathing doesn't do anything, Has two types of sheathing, just to mention them. One is non-plenum and the other is plenum. Use plenum rated sheathing in a special return sealing where the plenum is used as a ducking system. So I'm going to open these up. So this is your pair 1, the blue. This is your pair, maybe put them in order here. This is pair 2. I'm sorry, say again. This is pair 2. So you got pair 1, you got pair 2, you got pair 3, and you got pair 4. And that's what it looks like. And so you untwist them, and you saw the neat little way I did it. I just slide it on there and I spin that in my hand, and it opens it up nice and neat there. And so the white always comes first. So this is white, blue, and then blue. And then you're going to have on your orange one, you're going to have white, orange, and then orange. That's going to be pair 2. It's the same thing when you're punching it down to the back of a patch panel, or you're punching it down onto a 66 block. You're going to have the different pairs. And you need to know what cable comes first and what cable comes second. That's all dealing with the color code that most people don't deal with unless you're an installer. I'm having a hard time because of that nick in there. Let's see if we can get this done. So that's how it goes. Now, if you think the color code is from left to right and it starts with this, no, it's actually run by pairs. But each pair always starts with the white one, the white blue and then blue, the white yellow and then yellow. I'm sorry, not yellow, orange. And then you have green, a white green, and brown green. Let's take a look at the color code in particular to make sure you got it down and you know what pin gets what. So when we're talking about the RJ45s and pinning out of an RJ45. Now, some people have asked, well, what happens if I cable from the patch cord in the data room and then I take it out to a jack and I cable at the jack, but both ends I cable with the B standard. But I have patch cords that have the A standard. Now, can I use those? Yes, you can, as long as end to end is the same. This being an end, that being an end. If they're different, they're crossover. You can plug this into this is a B patch cord, a 568B. If you plug this into something that was cabled to 568A, it would still work, and it would not be a crossover cable. Some people have difficulty with that idea. It's just each link has to be same at each end for it to be a straight through. So it's the same thing with cabling a building. You cable it with A, I have no idea why you would do that, because the majority of people cabling is cabling with B. And I know some people are going to send me some notices and tell me that they do it differently. Okay, I don't care. I'm just telling you how everybody I know that's in the industry cables it to 568B. And that's what I've done for many, many decades. 568B. Come across a patch cord that's a 568A. I don't know if they even make them, to be honest with you. So you come across that patch cord, yeah, it can be used, and it won't be a crossover because both ends of the segment are either an A or a B. They're not A at one end and B at the other. They're both the same. So if it's A at one end, it has to be A at the other. Same thing with the cable and behind the wall. If it's A at the jack, it has to be A at the patch panel. And throughout your system, I would always stick with B, 568B. Well, I don't want to belabor the situation, so why don't we just leave it at this right now? Real quick, I should have said this a couple times. Please, please, please subscribe. If you like this type of information, it's been any valuable to you, it doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. Just subscribe and hit the like button. And also comments. If you have a better way to do this, or you have other ideas, or you've had problems in the past and you want to tell the rest of the world about your problems, and fantastic, okay? Just, write something to me in the messages. One other thing, if you're going to message me, okay? If you're going to message me, do not include your website. Do not include foul language. You can disagree with me, that's absolutely fine, but I won't allow it to be posted if it has foul language or you're promoting a product. Now, if you want to comment about the products I'm using, absolutely, please do. But I'm going to automatically block you if you use this as an advertisement tool for something you're selling. So I've had some weird ones too on that. But thank you for watching, appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful day.